You're listening to the Spark Radio Network, internet radio like you've never heard before. Innovation, creativity, and imagination are all said to begin with a spark. So fasten your seatbelt and take the ride of your life and listen for the spark.
You are listening to KLRN Radio, where liberty and reason still reign.
This is Slickery Trigger for Rebel Road Tactical. With proper care and feeding, your pistol will be ready when you need it. There to save your life. Shouldn't your gear be that good? Whether you need a holster for comfortable everyday carry or a tough-as-nails holster for your next training course, Rebel Road Tactical has what you need. Check us out on the web at rebelroadtactical.com.
Hey everyone, this is Jenny Earhart with the Southern Sisters Radio Show, the show for Southern women and the men who adore them. We love to chat every week about Southern culture, Southern food, hospitality, basically everything that makes up the Southern lifestyle. Join us this Saturday at noon and again on Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on AM 920 The Answer. I'm in Wenz World and I love it.
Hey baseball fans, I'm Casey Motter. Welcome to Wenz World.
Why, thank you, Mr. Motter. Indeed, this is Wenz World. And you know, you didn't have to tune in to Wenz World this afternoon, but you did. And I want to say thank you. It means the world to me that we get to spend an hour together every single week. Of course, you can follow the station on Twitter at KLRN Radio. Wait a minute, what happened to my music? What if this is the day the music died? Man, I hope not. I got a lot of stuff that I still want to do in life. But in any case, you can follow the show on Twitter also, at Wenz World Radio. And I'm going to spell that out because my folks gave me kind of a funky last name. So that's WENZ World Radio. Follow me, I'll follow you back. So we got one heck of a show ahead this week featuring at Radio Griff. We got hot takes and smart updates, sports news, the whole kit and caboodle. We're talking about the Gwinnett Braves name change. We made a suggestion a couple weeks back. We're going to see how seriously that suggestion's been taken. Apparently, we're down to 5 or 6 final names out of the 4,000 given online to the Gwinnett Braves organization. In addition, we're doing a bit of Braves talk with at Radio Griff. Matt Adams has been knocking the crap out of the baseball as of late, playing really well at first base, given Freddie Freeman's absence with that wrist injury when he was hit by a pitch about a month and a half back. Now, we got 2 first basemen, but Freddie Freeman has been transitioning over to the hot corner, third base. How for real can the Braves be about this move? We're going to get at Radio Griff's take on this. Also, his favorite quarterback ever, according to Ron Jaworski, the best quarterback of all time, Colin Kaepernick, back in the news, Twitter rants galore. We're going to dissect this and see what the world would be like in a world that Kaepernick wants. That, plus weird science with Dr. Fazal Rana. A brand new dinosaur has been discovered, the largest yet, called a Serapod. This was a dinosaur definitely not featured in the Jurassic Park movies. But, of course, our research scholar is going to fill us in on the details and all the fun stuff associated with that. Because imagine a dinosaur that could cause a sonic boom just by whipping its tail. Yeah, this is the kind of fun stuff we're talking about today. And of course, no edition of Wenz World Radio is complete without our male soap opera moment featuring the one, the only, Mr. Vince Bucci. We're recapping Money in the Bank, Raw, and SmackDown Live. So stick with us and get ready for a fun hour of radio. Thanks again for listening.
You're in Wenz World.
Featuring Gwinnett Griff. An official name change, live from the DDS here outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It's always a pleasure to have you in the world of Wenz. I couldn't do it without you, man. You're a staple to Wenz World.
I'm glad to be here. I got my big bottle of sparkling water. I'm ready to jump in. Got to stay hydrated. It is summer after all.
It is summer.
And it gets hot here in the Wenz World, especially with all these hot takes we have on the issues of the day.
Well, not only that, but you don't want to get dehydrated in the hyperheterosonic Curves Fitness.
That too. It serves many purposes, the big bottle of sparkling water. Gives you that carbonation feeling. You know, for those of us that love, like, who grew up in Atlanta and love Coca-Cola.
Right.
A good old Coke. This kind of, you know, satisfies that need a little bit.
Right. All the fun, but no calories.
Right. In fun, you might be overstating that a little bit, but hey, It keeps me hydrated, that's for sure.
And that's what's important here, from smart water to hot takes and smart updates.
Whoa. What a segue.
The Gwinnett Braves, with that significant name change, we made our opinion known several weeks back here in Wenz World. Mr. Prod G here, Radio Griff, whatever his name is, made a decent recommendation for a name change to be the
Gwinnett Griffins. It's my name. I grew up in Gwinnett. Mm-hmm. A griffin is like the body of a lion, the head of a eagle, has wings of an eagle. Pretty cool creature.
Right.
Cool name, Griffins. My name's Griffin, and I promised here on the radio live I would buy season tickets and I would go to every game if they changed their name to the Griffins.
And that has yet to be determined. Apparently,
there's still a chance.
5 finalists, right?
Well, they're going to announce, I just read, they're going to announce 6 finalists. They were supposed to do it this past week, but now they were overwhelmed with suggestions for the new name of the Gwinnett Braves. They're delaying that. They're going through, they said, over 4,000 entries. So they're going to look at all of them. I assume Griffins is one of the 6 being considered, hopefully.
Sure.
And, any day now, they'll release the final 6. Then my understanding is the public will then be able to vote and choose one of those 6 to be the new name of our Gwinnett minor league baseball team.
And you know what? Gwinnett Griffins definitely has the Wenz's vote here. My stamp of approval.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it needs to happen. I mean, what else is it going to be?
Why not? Why not use alliteration? I think it's a perfect segue into Freeman at third base.
Oh,
no alliteration there, but
not at
all. Why do we need it? We got an all-star potentially playing third base. Mark Bowman tweeted about it yesterday. Freeman getting some reps at third. My question is if his right wrist was impacted by that beamer at the plate, about a month and a half back?
Yeah.
This is definitely going to affect his throwing motion to first. And what say you, number one Atlanta Braves fan, Gwinnett Griff?
Yeah, I guess he apparently played third base in high school at some point. He's played some third base in the past.
Okay.
To me, just eyeball test, he seems a little tall and lanky to be a third baseman, in my opinion.
Right.
I don't know. I think this is a major bluff by the Atlanta Braves. I think Freddie's in on it. I think Mark Bowman's in on it. John Coppolella, Copy, we call him,
right.
The GM. I think he's in on it. Because the whole point of this is, Freddie went out, we traded and picked up this guy from St. Louis, Matt Adams.
Sure.
Who didn't do too much for St. Louis. But he's come to Atlanta, and this guy is hitting like crazy. And the problem with Matt Adams, though, is he can't play any other position besides first base. But he's hitting like crazy.
So you can't take him out of the lineup.
Right. But I think the ultimate goal here is to trade Matt Adams and get quite the haul in return. Now, but I think what's happened is they've tried to float that out there to other teams, and other teams are like, well, you have to get rid of Matt Adams anyways, so why are we going to give you a lot? Because you have Freddie Freeman. So why would we give you a lot for Matt Adams when he can't play any other position, and you have arguably the best first baseman in baseball coming back in Freddie Freeman? So, but I think the Braves are like, you know what? We don't have to get rid of Matt Adams. He can play first base, and Freddie Freeman will play third base. How about that? I think it's just a huge... I don't think it's going to happen. Now, if it does happen, I will be shocked. But, again, in Atlanta, there is precedent for this. I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth on this. Chipper Jones, middle of his career, moved to left field because we picked up Vinny Castilla to play third base.
Right.
And Chipper played left field for a few years. Arguably, that kind of screwed his knees up quite a bit, and it may have shortened his career by a year or two.
Well, not only that, but it shortened his name. When he moved to left field, he shortened his name to Larry.
Right.
And then when he went back to third, it was Chipper. So strong transition there. I think it's a smart move.
Thing is, though, Freddie Freeman and Matt Adams right now are both better hitters than anyone else, any other combination you could put out at first and third.
Right.
So if you can put both of them in the lineup, you're going to do it. When it comes down to it, I don't see it happening. I don't think Freddie Freeman... It sounds ridiculous. I don't think he's moving to third base. I don't see it happening. I think it's a bluff job, and I think they're going to end up trading Matt Adams, and I think they'll eventually get a nice return for him, hopefully.
Well, I hope so for the Atlanta faithful, Cobb County faithful, whatever they are now.
Hey.
Real quick to hit back on this the Gwinnett Griffins. Folks, whoever is in charge, because I know you're listening, everybody listens to Wenz World. Make the move. I will buy a hat, and I will attend many a regular season game with the Gwinnett Griffins. I might even buy a jersey.
Wow, a hat and a jersey.
Why not? I'll be that guy. I'll go to the concert wearing the T-shirt of the band playing.
Right.
Which, by the way, can I also sidebar conversation here?
Sidebar.
So I was at a Braves game. I think it was about 3 weeks ago when they had the bobblehead giveaway. For the fat guy, Bartolo Colon. Yeah.
The guy on the DL who's probably never going to pitch again for us.
DL. Right. No kidding. And, some guy was wearing an Oriole jersey, not a hat. I totally understand wearing a team hat of a team that isn't playing when you're at a game. But a jersey, I feel like there's an unwritten rule, much like a concert tee, where and this is kind of contradictory because if you're going to a game where that team isn't playing, you cannot wear that team's jersey.
That's going a little bit too all in on it.
Yes, too all in.
Hat, that's cool.
Yeah,
but you go the jersey.
Sure.
And God forbid you go the jersey and the hat.
Oh my gosh. I will throw you over the side. I mean, that is Boston Tea Party stuff. You just cannot do that. And likewise, I think the opposite could be true. If you're going to a concert, let's say our favorite band, Nickelback.
Right.
If we're to head to Nickelback at Phillips Arena this weekend, front row seats, sidebar there, and backstage passes. I love me some Chad. He's just amazing. And he's quite handsome also. Hyper hetero in a hyper hetero way. I can't wear one of my 6 Nickelback t-shirts. I got to wear my Creed t-shirt. Or my Stained t-shirt.
Right.
Something like that.
That many people hold that opinion that you can't wear. But it is weird, though, when you think about it. You go to a Braves game, you wear Braves clothes.
Yeah.
But you go see Nickelback, you can't wear a Nickelback shirt.
No, you just can't.
That's kind of weird. You look like a dweeb if you do that,
It's a no-no.
Right. It's a weird thing.
Speaking of no-nos and weirdness, your boy, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Colin Kaepernick.
All time.
According to Ron Jaworski, and Jaws is always right, he's come out on Twitter again. Would you like to read it, or would you like me to read it?
I'll let you read it.
The system that perpetually condones the killing of people without consequence doesn't need to be revised. It needs to be dismantled. And below is a side-by-side picture of a runaway slave badge and a police badge. Now, Gwinnett Griff, what say you on this latest drama-filled tweet by the greatest quarterback of all time, Colin Kaepernick?
We've said it many times on here. I'm a diehard San Francisco 49ers fan. Mm-hmm. I thought Colin Kaepernick was the next Steve Young, Joe Montana combined into one.
Wow.
He looked pretty great there. Jim Harbaugh had him playing great. They went to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
They just missed winning a championship. I mean, they were that close to winning it all. Colin Kaepernick could have a Super Bowl ring. I just don't think the guy wants to be employed anymore. There's all this talk about no one that the NFL is blackballing Colin Kaepernick. And here this guy goes and compares the modern day police to runaway slave catchers of the past. Obviously, all makeup of people are police. It's not a racial thing when it comes to police. All kinds of different people are police. Straight, gay, black, white, yellow, red, whatever. The guy that wasn't a smart tweet to send out there. The NFL is like the most American, it's the Shield, it's the most American sports league there is. And for Kaepernick to go out and say something like that, where it seemed he was already obviously having a tough time getting employed by anybody, why would any owner, because the guy's not going to start this year unless there's a dramatic injury somewhere,
right,
which could happen. Why would an owner, who mostly are Republicans and, are probably already a little iffy on Cap, why would you want to bring in that distraction as your backup You want your backup quarterback to be, you never want to hear from him unless, he has to suddenly step in and take over for the starter because the starter got hurt. Then you want him to just, be great or good enough. Why would you bring in someone like Colin Kaepernick, who has all this? It's we've talked about it before, I think, on here, how it's the Tim Tebow effect, but opposite. Tebow was kind of this polarizing figure almost for the opposite reasons. He was such a good guy, and the fans almost demanded that he starts and he's put in the game and blah, blah, blah. Where Kaepernick, it's this whole opposite. Like, you just don't want any distraction whatsoever from a backup quarterback. And there he goes again with his tweet and just is like piling on to everything else. And I don't see the guy playing in the NFL this year. Probably not again. And I have the guy's jersey in my closet, man. I feel so conflicted about this.
I think that's a solid take. I mean, again, you're right. Why would you want any drama on the sideline from a guy that's not getting first team reps consistently.
Right. That's
more of a problem in the locker room than you signed up for. And I don't think his first passion is football, and that's okay. But
that's fine. You know what? I was going to say this. I give Colin Kaepernick credit. He said he was going to donate $1 million of his own money to all these different organizations that he believes in. He's gone through and he's in the process of doing that. He's donating like $100,000 every month for like a year to all these different organizations. $100,000 of his own money. That's even making millions of dollars like he has. That's still a chunk of change to be given away.
Absolutely.
So I give him credit for following through and doing that, because lots of times you see players and they're almost just the spokespeople for things, but they don't ever like donate their own time or money. Or if they donate their time, they show up for a photo op and then they're out of there. He's putting these camps on across the country.
Right.
I don't necessarily agree maybe with what he's teaching.
Sure.
It's maybe a little, a little ridiculous for me, but we live in America. He has every right to do this. I support him to that degree. And he's following through and actually doing that. He's spending time at these camps. He's donating money, donating time and whatnot. So I give him credit on that. And I almost wish a year ago when all this started, he would have never done the whole kneeling down thing and all that and just said, you know what, maybe had a little press conference or said it at the locker after a game or practice and said, I don't like what's going on in this country right now. I'm going to do something about it. So I'm declaring right now on September 1st, 2016, for the next year, I'm going to donate $1 million of my own money to these different groups I believe in. If he just would have done that, people would be like, oh, that's cool. Way to go, dude. And no one would have ever thought it, But then again, he has created a discussion. We're talking about him now.
Right.
If he wouldn't have done all this, we wouldn't be talking about him. But as I hear myself talk, we were talking about him. We're not talking about necessarily the issues that he wants to be brought up.
Right. And I think that's the silver tuna right there. That's what it's about. And I think, honestly, and I can't read a man's heart. Nobody can. But it does seem like the conversation is focused around the man and not the issue that he's talking about. And, I mean, back when he was wearing the Fidel Castro shirt, I'm thinking, like, dude, you're wearing a shirt of a man that his middle name is oppression.
Right.
So I don't get that.
At one point, he was wearing socks with, like, pigs dressed as cops.
Right,
like
right.
So it's like, don't be immature about it. He does these things that seem kind of mature-ish, if you're going to take the stand that he's taking. And then he does stuff like the Castro shirt or the pig cop socks or whatever.
Right,
or tweets like this it's immature. It's just not smart.
Well, let's just say in a perfect world, which would be Colin's world, according to him, that there is a dismantled police system. What would that look like? So for these high-profile athletes with big houses and nice things inside their houses, who are you going to call when you're getting robbed? Are you going to defend yourself with your arsenal? So to me, it leads to a culture of vigilantism in the wild, wild west, and we all know how that works out. I mean, is there a court system? Is there any quote-unquote justice? Who makes the rules? What are the standards? Is it your word versus mine? And who was the court? Who are a jury of our peers? What would that look like? Is that a world that Gwinnett Griff wants to live in?
No, not at all. But apparently Colin Kaepernick does. I think you've already thought through in those, that paragraph you just said. I think you've already thought through this more so than probably he has, honestly. Yeah, because what's next, Colin? Okay, you want all this stuff. Oh, we dismantle the police force. Okay, now what, bud? Tell us what to do. It's Colin's world, right? So how's this all going to work out now?
The movie where everybody gets a free pass for like 12 hours.
Purge?
The Purge, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Raising hell for a solid 12 hours, and then you get back to normal. So you better be careful what you ask for.
Okay, Colin, you're right. Let's dismantle the police. Now what?
I just don't get what he's after. I think at this point, what you said earlier hits the nail on the head. Colin wants Colin to be his own brand, and he does put his money where his mouth is, but I just don't get the idea of complaining about a situation unless you have a realistic solution.
Right. He needs to stick with what he's been doing, kind of, is do these camps, teach people what you believe in. That's your right. Donate your money to these organizations. That's your right. That's a great thing. Rock on with that. He's making it about himself again. Right when the NFL season ended and, it's free agency time, Kaepernick suddenly, it leaks out that he's determined that he's going to stand this year for the national anthem, this upcoming football season. Apparently that's what he's claiming. Right when he needs a job, he suddenly, decides he's not that distraction's no longer going to be a thing. Be one way or the other, dude. He's almost at times trying to play it both ways. And I think it's just a sign of immaturity.
Right. How old is he now? Do you know?
I don't think he's even 30 yet, man.
I mean, he still might have an opportunity if he plays his cards right to get a backup role, but he's going to have to sincerely do a 180. He's going to have to do what Trump needs to do and stop freaking tweeting. Just stop tweeting altogether. Just do things. Don't be noticed. Fly under the radar.
Can you imagine how different 2017 would be if Twitter wasn't around?
Man, it wouldn't be 2017.
Would we be this angered at Colin Kaepernick? Would Donald Trump even be president?
Wow. Those are all great questions.
Two big news items from the past, 18 months.
Yeah.
Trump and Kaepernick.
Right.
Almost opposite ends of the spectrum there. Yeah, but if it wasn't for Twitter, would either of these guys be at the heights they have reached? Would have happened? Who knows? It's all Twitter's fault.
I blame it on social media. I blame everything on social media. I mean, it's the car's fault for the people that wreck. It's the phone's fault for the people that text. Why not blame it on social media?
Right. Guns are the ones that shoot people.
That's right. Heck, sometimes they fire themselves. Who knows? But those are all fantastic things to ponder until next time with Gwinnett Griff here. Follow him on Twitter until he creates a new handle at Radio Griff, I guess is the best way to reach out. And we won't give out your personal cell phone number on air. That's probably not a good idea.
We got kind of deep today.
I think so, and that's what we try to do. We try to take it below the surface level that the rest of the fake sports news does.
Fake sports news.
Fake sports news. You only get the hottest of takes here in the Hyper Hetero Sauna. Live, actually, at Curves Fitness here. So come see us. We'll be here for the next 10 minutes. If you don't make it, no problem. We'll try and catch you next time. At Radio Griff again on Twitter and at Wenz World Radio. Gwinnett Griff, always a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Gotta love Gwinnett Griff. Follow the man on Twitter at Radio Griff. Thanks again, brother. When we return in just a few minutes, Weird Science with Dr. Fazal Rana. Follow the good doctor on Twitter at RTB_FRANA. A Serapod, a dinosaur that causes a sonic boom when it hits its tail against the ground. Yeah, true story. Stick with us. We'll be back.
You're in Wenz World.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Carr from Reasons to Believe, and I believe that Wenz World is large and in charge.
This is Wenz World. It's Weird Science time.
It's Weird Science time, and speaking of large and in charge, the largest dinosaur yet discovered has taken place, and of course we have our scholar from Reasons to Believe. Reasons.org is where they're found online. Dr. Fazal Rana, welcome back to the world of Wenz. How are you?
I'm doing well, Joey. How are you?
Doing phenomenal. I've always been fascinated with the Jurassic era, and I'm only throwing that word out because it's the only one I've memorized because of the movies they're in. Just recently, paleontologists have discovered the largest dinosaur yet. How big was this creature?
Well, to use technical jargon, it was ginormous. But in all seriousness, this is a Serapod, so you probably are familiar with these types of dinosaurs. They're like brontosauruses. I think it's iconic for how we picture dinosaurs. But this thing was the largest dinosaur that we've ever discovered, not only in terms of its mass, but in terms of its height and length. This thing was based on measurements of its femur, about 77 tons, which is about 150,000 pounds. So that's a massive animal. And the second place contestant in this contest is a dinosaur that's also a Serapod that comes in at about 70 tons. So this thing's head over heels ahead of this second place contender. But what's interesting is, let's compare it to an animal today.
Yeah.
An African elephant would be about 5 tons. So a really large animal. And in terms of its height, 65 feet tall. A dinosaur called a Sauroposeidon was about 60 feet tall. And again, for comparison, a giraffe is about 16 feet tall. So really, really large animal. In fact, researchers estimate that if it stood on its back legs and extended its long neck, it would be as tall as a building that's 75 stories in height.
Wow.
So amazing. And then finally, in terms of its length, 130 feet long. The next closest dinosaur is something called a Supersaurus, which is about 130 feet long. And the longest animal alive today is a reticulated python that's 23 feet in length. So it's almost unimaginable how big this animal was.
So you're talking about how big and long the dinosaur is. So how much of the skeleton do they find to prove that?
Well, it's very rare to find a complete Serapod skeletal specimen.
Right.
And then when they do find things that are nearly complete, they usually lack the head and lack parts of the tail and things like that. So they had about 150 bones that represented about 7 individuals, but it wasn't a nearly complete specimen. But paleontologists work puzzles, and so they find all these different dinosaur finds, and they can kind of piece together what the animal would have looked like. And when they have a nearly complete specimen, they can estimate its size, and then by comparing other parts of other dinosaurs, they can calculate the size, the mass, the length of these particular dinosaurs. And that's what they did in this particular instance, is they had a femur, and they measured the length and the circumference, and from that, they calculated its mass, its size, and its length.
So where did this creature live? Because back in that time, there probably was more of a Pangea-like continent, like one big landmass. Is that correct? Or
well, I mean, this dinosaur would have lived 95 to 100 million years ago, and so the continental structure would look very different than it does today. And in fact, this dinosaur was found in Patagonia, which is a desert area of Argentina, but it would have been a forest in those days. In fact, there's actually a debate among paleontologists as to whether or not creatures like this newly discovered creature lived in the water or on the land. There's some evidence that indicates it may have actually been able to swim, others that it just simply walked in shallow water, and others, dispute, both of those claims. It looks like it might have been living near water, however. So this creature lived in a forest environment.
So since it lived in a forest environment, is it safe to assume it was an herbivore?
Yes, this creature ate massive amounts of plant material. And in fact, it's really cool how this creature consumed food. They typically would stand still, and then they would just swivel their neck to get plants beneath them, above them, to their left and to their right. And they, again, consumed massive amounts of food. We actually know that these dinosaurs were rather indiscriminate in the plants that they ate. They weren't going after special plants. They were just eating everything in sight.
Right.
And we know that because we have what are called coprolites, which is fossilized poop that we can actually study of these dinosaurs. In fact, there are paleontologists who specialize in fossilized poop. They're called coprologists. So those are scientists that really know their stuff, so to speak. But we know that what this dinosaur ate because of that. These dinosaurs lived in herds, maybe a couple dozen individuals in the herd,
right.
And they would probably just devastate forests if they went through them, eating everything in sight.
So I'm sure that they also defended themselves by their herd-like mentality, right, Dr. Fuzz?
Yeah, they would, and also their tails were really long, and they could crack those tails like a whip. In fact, there are some paleontologists that think they could crack their tails so aggressively that it would create a sonic boom.
Wow.
And, and either that just scared away potential predators, or they would actually use the tails to strike out at predators. So these were not animals that you would necessarily want to mess around with.
So you said they lived around 90 million years ago. So that would have put them around, the Triassic or Jurassic era?
Yes, I think they would have been living in the Jurassic era.
Very cool. So they had severe predators. I mean, we've all seen the Jurassic Park movies. It would have been interesting to see the creators of those films try and reenact what a Serapod would look like. Because I know they did Brachiosaurus and Brontosaurus, but I don't think they ever tried to recreate a Serapod. Am I wrong?
I don't think they did. And, you surely wouldn't want one of these things loose.
All the plant life on the set would be gone for sure. So I know in the past people have been trying to recreate some of these ancient beasts. What kind of realistic approach could somebody take in this endeavor? Is this a possibility to create or recreate Serapods just based off the genetics that we found?
No, we wouldn't be able to recreate these dinosaurs. It's unlikely any of their DNA would have survived for that vast periods of time.
Right.
So the idea of recreating these things is probably not likely. And even if for some reason we found a mosquito in amber that had DNA in its gut, and we could sequence it and determine it belonged to a Serapod, we still probably couldn't reconstruct the animal. So the idea of ever recreating these animals is science fiction. It's fun to think about, but there's, in my view, very little likelihood that it could ever happen.
Well, it's kind of a bummer because I've been looking for somebody to cut my grass, and this kind of creature would be magnificent during the summertime. Just let him loose out in the front yard, and he can cut my grass and the neighbor's grass, and but he would be a killer to the landscaping community around Atlanta. So maybe that's a good thing for business.
Yeah, and he takes one dump, and you probably got a big mess to clean up in your yard.
And I wouldn't want to tick him off either because he'd hit me with that tail and it would be game over.
That's right.
I don't know. The whole thing's fascinating because I've never seen a dinosaur, and it's a part of our history, and I just think it's absolutely just captivating to think about. And I think that's one of the reasons those films did so well, because people are just enthralled with this idea of these ancient creatures that we never got a chance to see.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's just fun to think about God as this lavish, extravagant, divine artist that just probably made these creatures just for the kicks.
Yeah, because really giving him glory was them just doing what they did. And I think that the same could be said about animals today. Fish that swim and birds that fly. I mean, they're really just giving back to their creator. So, folks, connect with the Good Doctor on Twitter at RTB_FRANA and online, reasons.org. Reasons to believe, where faith and science converge. Dr. Fuzz, always great to have you in Wenz World, and I can't wait to chat next time.
Thanks for having me, Joey. It's a pleasure.
Right. It's time to grease up with baby oil and throw on that spandex, because right after this break, we are back with our male soap opera moment featuring the one, the only, the invincible Vince Bucci. Follow the Booch on Twitter at Vince Bucci, Bucci. Stick with us.
Hey everyone, this is Jenny Earhart with the Southern Sisters Radio Show, the show for Southern women and the men who adore them. We love to chat every week about Southern culture, Southern food, hospitality, basically everything that makes up the Southern lifestyle. Join us this Saturday at noon and again on Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on AM 920 The Answer. I'm in Wenz World and I love it.
FABULOUS.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Wrestling is so fake, Joey.
It's still real to me, damn it.
This is your male soap opera moment.
One heck of a pay-per-view last Sunday on the WWE Network, which, Bucci, by the way, we can have for a mere $9.99. It is the male soap opera moment. Of course, it wouldn't be the same without the one and only, the wrestling encyclopedia himself, Mr. Vincent J. Bucci.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen, back again for another edition of the male soap opera moment, and this is what we like to call the FABULOUS edition of the male soap opera moment. Very, very, very special, very fabulous, because that's what we're going to do here. This is going to be a show you guys are going to enjoy.
And Wenz World's own personal Ellsworth isn't here, and that in Chamso is out for the week here, so we're going to have to do it without our helper, but that's okay. Carmella had quite a bit of help last Sunday in the first ever woman's Money in the Bank ladder match. Boy, oh boy, we had some predictions, and Booch, you said you wanted Carmella to win, and you know what they say, dreams do come true.
Yes, but it turns out there's another saying they don't tell you. Dreams do come true, but not always the way you want them to come true. So this is where I got the mixed feelings. On the one hand, I wanted Carmella to win the briefcase. I am not the least bit happy with how she got the briefcase at all. I felt that Ellsworth getting involved was completely unnecessary. And look, I'm all for controversy in wrestling. I know Eric Bischoff coined the phrase, controversy creates cash. The man is not wrong when he says that. But I felt like there was controversy put into a match that didn't need it. It was not necessary to make. You already were making history with the first ever women's Money in the Bank ladder match. That makes it memorable all on its own. We didn't need Ellsworth to get involved, even though it's kind of crazy because when Ellsworth set up the ladder, the crowd actually popped for Ellsworth to climb it.
When he was climbing the ladder, I thought, what a great gimmick. Have him take the briefcase, let him be the Money in the Bank contender. It's because he's practically in the women's division anyway. When's the last time he actually wrestled apart from standing outside the ring defending Carmella?
Exactly.
It would have been cool because I don't think anybody in the locker room would be like, oh, it's not fair, because in truth, he would get his ass beat by any of those women in the ring.
So yeah, in that regard, it would work. I also felt like it was kind of a bad PR move, in my opinion. Like, you had the first ever women's Money in the Bank ladder match, and a dude climbs up and grabs the ladder
and pushes Becky Lynch off. Clearly,
oh my God!
I was ready because I had predicted that Becky Lynch was going to win.
Yeah,
and I was like, yes, it's going to happen. And then he pushed her off, and I was like, okay, I can deal with this. I can live with this. But in fairness, what rule did they break? They didn't break a single rule.
That is true. It's like how do you break a rule that doesn't exist? And it was very, very interesting because we have seen interference in Money in the Bank ladder matches before.
Right.
But we've never seen anybody just grab the briefcase and be like, oh, here you go.
And you know what?
So it's a weird one.
Exactly. And those particular instances were mentioned on SmackDown. I mean, Carmella knows her history. She brought him up, and if you look at the faces on the crowd, what started as anger turned more into understanding.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's true, like when they said the first person to gain possession, because I didn't even know that was a rule until a couple years ago. There was a TLC match. I can't remember the other two guys that were in it, but I know Dolph Ziggler was one of them. It was for the Intercontinental title. And there were two guys, and Ziggler was like on the floor. I think he was knocked out. Two guys were on the ladder fighting, like on top of the ladder, and they were grabbing the championship. So they're trying to rip the title off the hook. Well, at some point it got unhooked, but the title slipped and fell on the ground. Ziggler crawled over, grabbed the belt, and the ref rang the bell and said he's still the Intercontinental Champion.
Wow.
That was the first time I ever heard of this possession rule in wrestling. So it was kind of so it is a rule. I just never seen anybody do it the way they did it, and I just felt like it. I felt like it was interesting, but I felt kind of robbed from that a little bit.
Oh, man, and there's so much more to talk about concerning the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Also, SmackDown to follow, and, of course, Monday Night Raw, all on the on-demand edition, SoundCloud.com, up in the search bar, WENZ World. Till next week, have a nice day.
Bang, bang.
Thanks for listening to Wenz World On Demand. Follow the show on Twitter at Wenz World Radio, WENZ World Radio. We'll follow you back. My friends, welcome Dr. Pavan Grover back to Wenz World. The good doctor is here to discuss the opiate crisis in America. It's quite heartbreaking. Dr. Grover, how are you?
I'm great, Joey. Great to talk to you again.
Yeah, last time we talked, we had a fantastic conversation. We chatted about how the news can cause us stress that we may not even be truly aware of. This time we're talking about something slightly more morbid, and I was watching the Today Show a few weeks back, and they were talking about the opiate crisis, and I know here in the Southeast, I live in Georgia, this is becoming a serious killer. I think deaths are up about 37% over hand over fist back from 2015 to 2017. And you're here to dispel some myths, 3 of the biggest myths about the opiate crisis.
Well, certainly, Joey, when this is horrible, what we're seeing in the news, and I think the most vivid image is when we see the parents in the front seat, with a heroin needle in their arm, overdose with the kid in the background. I mean, that's just that image just kind of rocks you. And this is happening a lot. We see a lot of people overdosing to the point where, first responders are basically running out of Narcan because people are overdosing so much. But if you take a step back, and, the CDC, for example, tells us that 91 people die a day from an opiate overdose. Wow. And then we get into, that this is all because of doctors prescribing too much narcotics. It's all due to overprescribing by doctors. And we're going to go into that. There was actually a period where that was happening, and now we're kind of scaling back. But when you look at that number of 91 people dying a day from opioid, what we don't realize is that number includes overdoses from prescription medications prescribed by doctors, but it also includes heroin, and it includes a street drug called fentanyl, which is actually causing most of the overdoses. So what's happening on the street is, there was a period several years ago when there was a real undertreatment of pain, right? We weren't treating pain adequately, even cancer pain. So there was a whole movement to try to improve the prescribing of medications to, because that's where pain became what's called a fifth vital sign. You had heart rate, blood pressure, and so they made pain a fifth vital sign. Unfortunately, that pendulum's overswung, and so people started writing, a lot of prescriptions. There was pill mills that popped up, which are basically illegitimate centers that sell pain medications for cash. And then there was no way of testing at that time or adequate form of testing. So patients would be going doctor to doctor to get medications, or they were taking it along with alcohol. And so there was a lot of accidental overdoses. So as a result of the opioid crisis, more knowledge, the pendulum has been kind of swinging back to where these days, to be honest with you, most legitimate doctors are afraid to write any medications because they're being vilified, every day in the press. And so what's happened is over the years, the price of illegal prescription drugs skyrocketed because there was more of a restriction, and heroin came on the market. I mean, it was always there, but there's a newer heroin on the market. It's cheap, it's available, and it's more potent. So a lot of what we're seeing on these overdoses is actually a heroin crisis. So what might have started as the overprescribing of narcotics is a full-blown heroin crisis. And the reason people are overdosing, there's this synthetic morphine called fentanyl. Right? Remember, Joey, you remember that TV show Breaking Bad?
I sure do.
Right? So remember when they would set up these meth clinics. And now what's replacing a lot of these meth clinics is fentanyl clinics. So people actually get this synthetic morphine in the mail from overseas, and then they're cutting it into the drugs. And it kind of sounds counterintuitive. I mean, there was a lady recently. She was getting Xanax, which is not even a narcotic, off the street, and it was laced with this fentanyl, and she overdosed immediately. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive. I mean, why would drug dealers want to kill off their customers? But the thing is that the chemistry in mixing this fentanyl is very complicated. So inadvertently, they put too much, and that's what's leading to a lot of these shocking overdoses. It's actually heroin plus this fentanyl that's being cut into the drugs.
And again, if you're just joining us, we are with Dr. Pavan Grover. Of course, we call him Pav here in Wenz World. You can reach out to him. Check out all of his fantastic articles, specifically about the opiate crisis, on invospine.net. That's INVO spine.net. And I'm really glad you talked about the illicit sale of fentanyl. And it's also being mixed in with other drugs, such as tramadol. Apparently, the death rate of the synthetic opioids, other than methadone, has increased by 72%. And that was just between 2014 and 2015. Here we are 2 years later. We don't have the statistics in front of us from the CDC, but one can only imagine that these numbers are on the rise.
Well, the number on the rise, and those numbers are skewed in the sense that when, you hear the number, it's all of them combined. So
right.
And then, it's very difficult to test for an overdose from state to state. And this heroin actually turns into morphine in the body. So actually, we're probably underreporting the deaths from heroin. And the other thing is that we have to keep that's really what's going on, to target it, because what happens is you hear these reports about the opiate overdose, and then the next thing that you hear is, well, we're going to stop this crisis by reducing doctors writing prescriptions, right? Or like in New Jersey, for example, they're trying to restrict the prescribing of pain medications to 5 days, right?
Sure.
And the problem is this just going to worsen the problem, because there are a subgroup of patients who need prescriptions, right? After surgery, or they have chronic conditions. So they're going to find it difficult. Some of them, that has happened. They've had a difficult time getting legitimate, and they're using it properly because of all this vilification, and doctors are scared to death now to write this stuff. So they end up going on the street and getting the cheaper, heroin. So, we have to stay focused on what the real problem is, because you'll see that when you watch the news next time, after you see about the overdose, the next sentence will usually lead into, well, we're going to restrict the writing of pain medications. And the truth is that was a problem, but it's not the current situation on the ground. And so unless we focus, on the heroin issue, we're just going to drive the problem worse.
Right. And of course, fentanyl is a synthetic man-made opioid that is in fact 50 times more potent than heroin. and 100 times more potent than morphine. Talking about the illicit version as well as the prescribed version, where do you see Big Pharma going next? Because this is going to become one of those issues that it will eventually be unavoidable.
Now, it's interesting when we talk about that, Joey. That's a good point in terms of where is things going in terms of now there, you see in the news there's some lawsuits against the big pharma, and they have, that's a separate issue. The drive towards, in terms of where the research goes, trying to find medications that don't have as much of an addictive as morphine. But the problem is that we're just going to, the street market that's really where the problem is. And
right.
To give you an example of this fentanyl, you mentioned about how strong that is. I know here in Texas, there's been issues where the first responders, the police, have gone to and broken into, where they have like a fentanyl store or they find it in the car. And just by touch, they overdose, right?
Wow.
So now they have to, first responders have to have almost like hazmat equipment breaking into a drug hold because they have to have Narcan now because just even the touch of the fentanyl can take them out.
So forgive me for my ignorance here. I've never been around fentanyl. Is it a powder? Is it a liquid? How does it flesh itself out?
It can be in different forms. Here, in terms of just the touch, sometimes it'll get absorbed, like in the air with the heat, and that's where they'll get it. Usually there is a prescription version of fentanyl, which is on a patch.
Okay.
Right? It was usually used in cancer, and where a person would put it, and it would, like a skin patch, and it would release medication over 3 days. That's the prescription version of it. The street version, as I said, is coming overseas in the mail, and so the mixing of that is an inexact science, and that's a lot of these overdoses. The other thing too is wrote an article recently in the Hill about Tiger Woods was having an issue with medications, but a lot of people don't know that's just a tip of the iceberg, because there's more people now who are actually driving under the influence of prescription medications even more than alcohol.
Right.
So it's becoming because more danger on the roads because more people are mixing their medications, and so it is a serious issue beyond just the dramatic stories we see in the news.
Now, Dr. Grover, you talked about fentanyl being brought over here from other countries. Are these countries as close as Mexico or Canada, or across the pond?
Across the pond, usually from China.
Wow.
is where they get a lot of it. And, I know the authorities are trying to work with China to kind of curb some of this. Now, the raw materials are sent in the mail, and there's like fentanyl labs, as we talked about before, like meth labs, that start to cut these into the drugs. Now, heroin is not something that can be made in this country. It's coming from South America. And ironically, Afghanistan produces 90% of the world's heroin.
Right.
We have to kind of curb heroin at the source, because once it's here, it's very difficult to kind of battle because it is so addictive. And the other thing, too, is before, you've seen the visual, Joey, when you see movies of heroin addicts injecting heroin into their arms, with a rubber band and everything.
Right.
And the newer heroin, that was sticky and tar-like. The newer heroin is in a powdered form. So it can also be snorted, and it's much more potent and much more addictive. So that's really what we're dealing with on the streets, is this newer heroin that's causing a lot of these overdoses.
Right. And when you're talking about the newer heroin, among new heroin users, they say that 3 out of 4 have reported abusing prescription opioids prior to using heroin. So it seems like the cycle of this starts with a legitimate concern, i.e. an injury, surgery, where somebody is prescribed medicine, then their doctor doesn't write them a script, so they find it elsewhere, but then they inevitably run out of money, so then they turn to heroin. How do we drive a wedge into this vicious cycle to stop it completely?
So you bring up two really very critical points. Now, you mentioned that 3 out of 4 people who abuse heroin, and the CDC uses this as a basis, start with prescription drugs, right?
Right.
So the whole war on heroin, the thinking is in the CDC is that to beat the war or win the war on heroin, we need to win the war on prescription drugs.
Sure, it
right?
makes sense, yeah.
Right. But here's the one thing they didn't look at so that's a flawed study in terms of the 3 out of 4, because what they didn't look at was these patients who are addicted to heroin, did they get pain prescriptions in the normal course of pain medicine, right? Like they go to an injury, they get a medication, and so they develop this basically from the doctor, and it goes off into heroin. There's other studies that point out that actually like somewhere around 80% of people who abuse heroin, they got their prescription medications not from doctors, but from friends, from families, from pill mills, right? Wow. So the idea is that an addict will find his drugs, right, wherever he gets to it. So the focus on curbing completely, doctors writing from it, that's not really where they're getting the source. And, a lot of kids overdosing are from family and friends. So that's really key. If you are taking pain medications, you need to lock up your medication, right? Not especially from your kids, because a lot of accidental overdoses happens from kids getting into drugs. Now, the second part of that is there is 2 really good strategies of how to move forward, right? To where you stop the addicts, but you don't stop legitimate medications, because you don't want to get into that where you're basically people with cancer or legitimate pain problems, you're preventing them. But there's 2 testing that basically can prevent a lot of this. So if a doctor is writing pain medications, there's now databases that he can check to make sure that he's the only prescribing doctor, right? So he's not getting that addict who's going from doctor to doctor. The second is they can do urine tests to make sure that you're not combining the pain medication with alcohol or with sedatives, with other medications, and that you're taking the medication as prescribed and not diverting it, right? So these 2 tests can solve a lot of problems and avoid getting narcotics in the hands of addicts who can sell it on the street or continue and perpetuate this cycle.
Now, let me put my tinfoil hat on for a second and assert that there might
Do I need to put on my tinfoil hat to receive this?
The one I mailed you, if you don't mind. The one I sent you for this interview. It's just your size. You got a big brain, so I know you got a big head, too. But, as I put this on, I'm thinking, well, there's got to be some sort of cog in this wheel, i.e. doctors that are perpetuating this vicious cycle, in turn writing more scripts than deep down they probably know are required per customer or per patient. What say you on that?
Yeah, no, that's not really a conspiracy. This part of the problem, when it did start, was people over-prescribing medications. There's no doubt of that. Now that's kind of curbing, but there was. And then there are illegitimate doctors and pharmacies, just like in any other profession, who are making a lot of money. There's a lot of money tied into narcotics, right? So they're making a ton, pushing these through pill mills where they're basically getting cash. So there is responsibility all around, right? And that's part of what started the whole process. Is we overprescribed. Now it's coming down, but there are still unscrupulous people who are profiting off. These kind of things perpetuate because there's so much money in it, right? On all the drug cartels, the people profiting off, that's going to be there. So I don't really believe that's a conspiracy theory. There is culpability on all sides, and even on the pharmaceutical companies on different angles that we need to take responsibility for.
Now, as we take a real look about solutions of this vicious cycle, we take a look at the growing use of marijuana to curb the opiate crisis. I know research and studies are really early on in this, given only a handful of states have legalized for medicinal and recreational purposes. But based off your instinct and knowledge, where do you see this going? Do you think that's a viable option, people using medicinal marijuana to help curb their opiate addiction?
I think it is a viable option, and we'll leave that to the individual doctor. But there is a role for it, not only because certainly there's less, toxicity, you could say, of medicinal marijuana compared to a lot of prescription drugs, and so I believe there is a role. So if we speak specifically of medicinal purposes, there's a lot of benefits, especially with people with cancer, and then they have the nausea from chemotherapy. So there definitely is a role. We need to be open to curb back. And the thing is, the other thing, Joey, that you mentioned is we're on a lot of medications, right? A lot of people, we don't realize it, but I have patients, or I see patients who are maybe on 10 different medications from different doctors, and they're not all narcotics, but we don't know the interaction of taking so many pills. And a lot of times what ends up is you have a let's say you have taking a medication and you develop, let's just say, dizziness, right? So the doctor has to refer you to the neurologist, who has to do a battery of tests to make sure you don't have cancer or anything that's got real pathological cause. And then after that, let's say he puts you on something for the dizziness, then you develop constipation. So you can see this circle that's now built into the institution a little bit.
Right.
We end up being on so many medications, and one is treating the side effects of the other. So that's into your point of looking at alternative options. But we really are on too many medications, and we need to kind of curb back. Because if you see a commercial every day, you see a commercial. If you have this problem, we prescribe this pill for it.
Right.
And then the next commercial after that is, if you're taking this medication, you have the side effect, call this 800 number.
Sure. If you're dead, call this number and we'll get you some compensation, just compensation for all your worries and troubles. No, it is. It seems like one giant cycle that all starts out with a legitimate gripe or pain or something, and then somewhere along the lines, the deception of ease and comfort and convenience comes along the way, and it just seems like there's got to be a better way. Now, what advice would you have for people that are trying to get off of even the simplest of medications and trying to reduce their pain and just live a decent, comfortable life?
So, Drew, there's four factors that really can change your way you age, your health, dependence on this medication, because, the medicine is helpful, but what we learn now is that we have much more power over to controlling our own health. And the four things are, and you mentioned some of them in terms of what you do, but one is definitely nutrition, right? What you put in your body is crucial for how your body ages, number one. Two, all these health conditions. Two is going to be exercise. Right? You have to maintain strong exercise. So in hydration, you mentioned hydration. When we're born, we're about 90% water.
Wow.
And as we go towards old age, we're sometimes 20%. So we're slowly dehydrating as we age. And hydration is one of the healthy things, because we are life, right? Water is life. Life is water.
Sure.
And then the fourth thing is stress, right? People don't realize what negative things, chronic stress. We've talked about this before. The body does not know the difference between physical stress and mental stress. So it releases cortisol, which break down your immune system, break down your tissues. So these four things actually will keep you away from doctors: is hydration, nutrition, exercise, and finding a way to deal better with stress. Those are really the key to not only reverse the aging process, but to stay healthy.
Now, I remember our first chat. It was about how the news is affecting us and how it's stressing us out, whether we know it or not. And you just brought up one of the most fascinating points that these ears have ever heard, and that is our body does not know the difference between stress coming from watching the news or stress coming from family, but it has the same effect, and it's the release of that deadly cancer-causing chemical. Go into a little bit about perhaps some ways that we can help avoid the release of cortisol.
So one of the ways is actually you don't need sometimes big soul searching to make a dramatic change. We are creatures of habit, right? The way our brain is wired is that we basically adopt habits and routines to manage pretty much more of our life. Because when you're driving, you're not really thinking of how you're going to put pressure on the brake, how you're going to put pressure on the speed. You've got it under automatic. You'd be surprised how much behavioral, even our relationship, are kind of in a loop, right? So we are constantly wired for negativity, right? You have negativity on the news, you go to your friends, you talk about your problems. So we just think this is our normal, is to be in some sort of negative stress. And the truth is, the way to break that is just to disrupt that cycle, right? You do it with yoga, right? Or you do it with the mind because the opposite is true, Joey. If you're in a positive state of mind, or even laughing or in a happy state, you're actually releasing positive chemicals that do the opposite of what the stress hormones do, right?
Sure.
So you are actually, in that moment when you're doing your yoga, you're actually doing something physiologically positive for your body. So you're releasing chemicals that will help you heal and reverse the process. So what you'll find is that it's just a matter of habit, right? So if you just get into a habit of of de-stressing or not listening to the news or not thinking about problems all the time. You're going to have problems. You'll find it easier over time. Maybe now you're doing it 2 hours a day. And then what will happen is you'll get into a state where being positive and less stress is your normal state, not this negative state that we're taught to be in.
I love that. Again, if you're just joining us, we are with Dr. Pav Grover. Check him out online. Tons of fantastic scholarly articles on his website, invospine.net, and I'll spell that out, INVOSPINE.net. Dr. Pav Grover, fantastic conversation. A little heavier than our initial conversation about stress, but I feel like knowledge is power, and knowing what to do ultimately does relieve stress because it leaves us with more options. Dr. Pav Grover, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Joey.
My friends, I am honored that we got to spend this time together. Wenz World is available online, on demand, 24/7, 365. SoundCloud.com. It's also a free app in your phone's app store. And, of course, up in the search bar, WENZ World. Wenz World. It's there that you find all of these conversations, unedited, completely complete. And anytime you want to listen, they're there for you. Till next time, I hope everybody has a fantastic week. So take care and God bless.
Excellent!
Experience the Southern Sisters Radio Show uncensored and unfiltered on Facebook. Find us at Southern Sisters with Jenny Earhart. I'm in Wenz World, and I love it.